If more of you supported the show, I'd be less sick of podcasts.
The blah blah blah.
Sending out good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
The blah blah blah.
Good vibes. Good vibes.
108 breaths of deep gratitude and prayers for guidance and protection. And put on a didgeridoo and shamanic drumming track. Shivers or vibrations and stuff like that.
America.
Okay, guys, welcome back to the Grimerica Show. Coming at you this week with Gregory Shushan. Fun episode. It's a good one.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was exciting for me because all that research into the 3 days enigma and the ancient sort of the ancient texts and stuff, and with NDEs, like I really feel like he kind of, not vindicated is not the right word, but kind of confirmed what I was thinking about a lot of this stuff. You know that
It definitely didn't hurt.
Yeah,
Makes the research seem, it's like it's like I don't know. The word escapes me too, but it's like a thing that you're on the right path.
confirmatory maybe or something like that. I mean,
Confirmation.
I was like, well, why is it not well known that NDEs contributed to the view of our afterlife over thousands of years? Like I was thinking, reading all these accounts, thinking back to like what happened in their culture when somebody would come back from an NDE, maybe even with a power or with clairvoyance or healing or at least some sort of knowledge of the afterlife.
Did you move the green screen? Did you move the axe again, or did you?
I moved the axe again. Yeah, I'm trying to find the right spot for it because I'm going to do something else behind the other spot. I'm gonna doll up that axe with some runes and stuff.
There's got to be a better way to say that. There's something less gay. I mean, we're back in Trump's fucking America.
Okay, I'm going to spice it up. I swear to God, I'm getting deja vu like we did.
You will be off to the fucking camps, buddy. If you're acting gay, you can't be doing this. I'm
going to spice up the axe staff. I'm going to put
still kind of gay.
What?
Spice up the axe. I mean,
I'm going to imbue it with some magical properties.
Nice word, wordy wordsmith over here.
It's going to be talismanic when I'm done.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is getting old. Time to move on.
Anyways, so you're talking about my lack of green. I don't have a green screen anymore because I have an off. That's like that wall is finished and my office is pretty much finished. I haven't insulated the outside of it yet, but that's coming soon. And I have to fix a flood. Had a black water flood in the basement the other day.
Black water flood?
Yeah, like shit coming up out of the pipes and stuff. And my sister had that too. Me and my sister both within like 2 week period. Weird. But
man, how did it happen?
I don't know, really. I might have just put too much.
Did it come out of the toilet?
No, it came out of the shower drain where there's no shower. It's just a drain in the concrete.
How does that?
So there was a blockage in there, and it can't go all the way out the drain, and it comes back up through that.
Your toilet is somehow, so you flush your toilet and it came out your shower?
Yeah, pretty much. Not directly, it's hard to explain, but anyways.
I don't think that is good.
So I just scrubbed it all down yesterday, and it's cleaned it all up.
I don't think that's good.
No, we have to get that fixed before we redo the bathroom down here for sure. Because I ripped that old bathroom right out. I mean, just ripped it out. So it's just bare. Just there's a toilet on the concrete right now, and that's it. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's a shitty situation.
Well, it's probably better than your situation. Can we talk about the cat or?
I don't think we need to get into it too much, but we did have a tragedy with one of our cats. Yeah, it's too bad. It's the orange one. I mean, lots of people that met him, so he's a good
Tiberius, right? Tiberius. Yeah. I mean, what a good name for a cat too.
He came to a violent end, unfortunately. So
Well, that's the thing. I don't know how I could cope with that. I mean, I couldn't handle that if my cats got beaten up by dogs. I'd lose it. Like I could one thing to put your sick cat down, like if you had to put your cat down because they're suffering from like, a heart thing or cancer or something, and they're suffering like in that way. But if they're beat up and they're looking at you like, wow, wow, I'd be like, oh my God. I wouldn't be able to
we
handle
had to take him to the vet and put him down. So yeah, it was
what he got beat up by dogs or something, or what happened?
yeah, I don't want to get into it too much here. It's just, it was
Okay.
a shitty situation.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
That's
Well,
sorry about around here for a while.
Thoughts and
But,
prayers to Tiberius and the
He's
family.
a cool cat. He's always trying to talk to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. Maybe he'll reincarnate
I
into
got him in
one.
2016.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right around probably when Trump was getting voted in. I think like August 2016.
That's kind of weird, eh?
Yeah, crazy, right?
He's like gone the day before
It's
inauguration.
hard to believe it's been 8 years already that
Yeah.
since the first Trump go around. It's crazy to see like but my buddies freak out again about thinking it's like he's gonna do this, he's gonna do that, he's gonna do this. And I'm like, we kind of have some clear evidence that those things didn't happen. So I don't know. Maybe he will though. It could get weird this go around because all the people that would need to be on board for a complete clampdown of Western society are in the room. So,
but the weird thing is, like,
go the other direction.
I don't know. I mean, the way Elon says, like, I just have a hard time. Did you hear Elon say basically like this was like a path for humanity? Like humanity's going to survive. I mean, that's kind of
autistic.
That's kind of like hyperbolic, but he meant it. I don't think he's acting. He's
autistic as fuck.
I know, but that's what I mean. He's not acting. Like I don't think he's lying. I think he believes
He's also
that
not like a messiah or brilliant or anything. You know what I mean? He's just got some social ticks that make him useful.
he's not brilliant.
He's probably got some brilliance in him, but he's not like.
Oh, I think he's pretty smart.
I think he's kind of just,
Dude, he's the smartest. He's the richest person in the world. I mean, I don't care how. I don't care if it was all given to you or whatever, but he's maintained it and he's got all. He's become the richest man in the world. You got to have some smarts to be that.
So it's like a weaponized PayPal startup sold into other startups. I mean, I'm not saying that he's not a brilliant entrepreneur and a seemingly brilliant businessman that's managed to use the subsidization side of things across the spectrum to make his businesses worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Dude,
I have the utmost respect for him as an entrepreneur and possibly a coder or engineer or whatever you call those.
And a process improvement
programs like PayPal.
Well,
but as
not
far
only
as
that, but process improvement.
Any authority over the path of humanity. I mean, that's just that's like bizarre world. Come on.
Well, he was gonna, dude. They were gonna go after him.
Come on, the rover ain't on Mars, dude. We both know it, right? Do you think the rover's on Mars?
I do, yeah.
Come on.
This is where we're at. I mean, this is where we're at. Is that the conspiracy is so deep that none of these 7 craft that were on Mars when we had that NASA person on our show back in 2016, it probably was after Trump, or maybe it was 2015. Remember her name? What was her name again? And she was talking about all that. Emily Lakdawala.
Yeah.
How did I remember
She was
that?
into all that stuff, right? She was like,
well, yeah, dude. And I just thought after looking at researching her stuff, I'm like, this isn't all fake. Like it can't be.
We're not on the moon though, dude. We're not doing shit with the moon.
That's different.
Why don't we have a robot on the moon?
That's different.
Why is it different?
Because we're not allowed back on the moon. I don't know. I mean,
mining asteroids.
What?
Why aren't we mining asteroids?
Well, I mean, maybe somebody is. Maybe China is. Maybe I don't know why we're not mining asteroids. I mean, because here's the thing. This is what I was getting into. When I hear Elon talk about the improvements, the process improvements that they've made, and you can see like the development of his rockets and what they've done. He's really made some efficient products.
Yeah, but it's not 100 million miles away.
What?
It's not 100 million miles away sending pictures.
What? No, what do you mean? I'm talking about like what Elon does with the stuff he's doing right now, right? With
You don't.
landing the rockets and building the rockets and all that. Like, regardless, because I don't even think he should be working on those types of rockets. I mean, there's UFO technology out there. I mean, look, we just saw an disclosure happen last weekend with the egg. You know, the egg is there. What?
What egg?
You didn't hear about the egg?
I missed disclosure. How
You
could
missed
you-
disclosure, dude. Come on, where are you? Where are you?
So what's the egg?
It was a whistleblower came out and
Come on,
no,
man. Whistleblowers, not disclosure. I'm so sick of fucking whistleblowers. I'm sick of
no,
the
because
word.
this was a different one. This was the one that had his past was proven. Apparently, his background was all legit, and he had video of a sling. His helicopter was slinging an 20-foot diameter egg that was from non-human intelligence, and it was a video of it. So this is probably one of the first times that it's not like, where's the real whistleblower? Where's the first-hand guy? Where's this? All the UFO community wants to see the guy who was involved in it. So this guy comes out and he says he was involved in it. And he had other people that supported him and backed up his thing, and everybody shit all over it. And I was like,
People always
where's the nanu memes? I mean, nobody's even talking about that.
I want to see an egg on I need to see an egg on YouTube or something, you know?
Oh, you haven't seen it yet? Well, you'll see it. I mean, come on, you'll see it.
Oh, there's a video? There's a video of the egg?
That's what I'm telling you. There's a video of the egg. It's just a short video of the sling. He took it while he was letting the sling go. While he was letting the egg.
Oh, well, I want to see the video now.
It was a recovery program, right? He was in a helicopter with a sling. Anyways, I'm not saying it's real or not, but it's what people are asking for. It came. It's like it's been causing a big shitstorm. But where was I going with that? I was about the technology that Elon's using. So figure out how the egg flies, Elon.
And let America back on. I mean,
And let America back on.
Graham still will love you, even if you don't. You could probably like fucking just, I don't know, what could he get away with your Stockholm syndrome? We should have never let John X. We should have never let John X.
I don't like Darren. I don't trust him, but I just don't think he's fully acting though. That's all. It's
We should have never let you on Twitter. This is it.
You said X.
I did.
Let's just start calling it. Anyways, Tiberius left for Trump's inauguration, and he was here for Trump's first one. Isn't that interesting? He was born, and he lived through the first Trump era, and not through the second one. He'll reincarnate. Sometimes I think my old Dakota cat reincarnated into Zeus, but Zeus is already 12 years old or something, or 12 or 13. So he's
how long did he live?
I don't know, like 15 to 20, I think. Like he's getting pretty old, but 15 to 20, I would like to say. 20 might be on the high end.
Are yours all boys?
No, one boy and 3 girls.
And the boy's the most affectionate one?
No, they're all pretty affectionate.
What do you just like? Because you're just weird with them, or?
No, they're just cool cats. I mean,
some cats are cunts, you know.
Well, one of them's a bit weird. She's finicky, and you got to be careful. What?
Could be autistic. I mean, we could be making autistic.
Well, it seems like it. Yeah, the 2 of them feel autistic. But Zeus is a shoulder cat. He's the guy that I take out for walks. He's the male. He likes to like walk around on my shoulders and stuff, and he's pretty cool like that. He's always watching for me so that he can jump off my shoulders into closets and stuff. So he'll jump on you without warning.
There you have it. So as we head into this new quote unquote golden era of Trump, or maybe we'll become Americans, we'll see. But in the meantime, we do still need some support. You guys are supposed to be killing it down there. Most of the people that listen to the show, believe it or not, live in the USA. So if you guys are getting some value from your little Canadian podcast up here, it's time to consider some value back our way before we end up with a going out of business sign on the door up here at Gramerica headquarters. It seems like a free show, but it's not. We hustle and we do a lot of other things to try and make ends meet, but the show is supposed to be met with the value. If you're getting some value from it, you send some value back our way. over at grimerica.ca/support. And if you do, we'll mention you on the show. We'll make you a noble of Grimerica instead of a pleb, a shitty pleb. And if you do 1,000 Canadian, you get to be a lord or a lady of Grimerica. And 10,000 gets you, you get to be a god, one of the gods, the pantheon of gods in Grimerica, maybe. I mean, first we need one. So you could be like the head god or whatever that would be. Anyway, we do have a few people to thank.
The supreme being.
Yeah. We do have a few people to thank for coming through for us in these dark days of winter. First one goes out to Timothy Coke. $10. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. No note. If there's supposed to be a note, let me know. Then over to Jens Lowenberg, who came with 108. So
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's super helpful. January is the most expensive month of the year for us in Grimerica. We have all our stuff renewed because that's when we started a bunch of stuff. It was in January, like Outlawed and a bunch of new projects. When we,
I've got a note from Jens if you want me to read it.
Oh, yeah, good. He's got the note. Yeah, great.
So this is from Jens. Been meaning to do this for some time now. I met you guys at the Eclipse event. Such an awesome experience and memory for me and my family. I'm sorry I'm slow to reach out. I'm just a simple garbage man. I don't get on my computer and hey, Trump's got a new garbage truck. Maybe be a private garbage man for him. Remember that truck that he bought? Did he bring that to the inauguration, I wonder?
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it? I'm just a simple garbage man. I don't get on my computer and email much, if ever. When I listen to you, it's in my truck and on Spotify. You're my favorite podcast I listen to. I was so geeking out when I met you guys. My wife will still make fun of me. I would love to fanboy on and on, but must cut to the chase. I had a major synchronicity, including your podcast. Episode 676, Dennis Henson, maybe, I think. I had one too many bad experiences at a certain dump and was saying to myself, I have to do something different. When a message comes across my computer about a different route opened up. And a minute later, your podcast was saying to step outside of your comfort zone and take on your next level of challenges. So now I went from a safe side load route to a front load route, which means more challenges, but also more money. This happened at exactly the right time I needed it. I'm all over Randall's old stomping grounds now here in Minnesota. I've never given to a podcast, but I love you guys so much. I will send a donation. God bless you too. Thanks, gents.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Love those.
Couldn't do it without it. We need you. Thank you very much. We love you for it. Please, guys, consider heading over to grimerica.ca/support today and signing up for a monthly or making a one-time donation or some shit. Just do something.
I got another one from Corey here because Corey, speaking of golden ages, I mean, that's a pretty good symbolism to a golden age, right? Corey sent us some gold, some real gold. Hey guys, hopes all is well. I must say I'm so stoked. You all are so stoked. Darren thought it was DMT, LMFAO. Sounds like I get a lordship, so may I be decreed. Corey, Lord of the here and now. Said like the old-timey expression. What's the old-timey expression?
Lord of the year and now? I don't know.
Yeah. Corey, Lord of the here and now. Oh, and how? Oh, hang on. I misread that. Corey, Lord of the here and how.
Oh, I get it. Like, and how? Like the old time expression. And how? I'm such a bag. And how? So let's say it again. Say the whole title.
Corey, Lord of the here.
You don't have to say it.
How?
You don't have to say it in the old timey radio accent.
All right. Okay, that's I got another email. This isn't quite a support email, but it's an email that I'd like to read to everybody. Let's see here. I got another one here. I just want to double check what that one is. Why is that one even open? So this is the 51st state one. Oh yeah, here thinking about this. Let's read this. Hey, hey Graham, Dave from Utah here. Actually, we don't want or need Canada as a 51st state. You're completely dysfunctional with a massive debt to income ratio. America does not need a second giant California to the north that will even further corrupt the underlying principles of our Constitution. But because this has always been the plan of the NWO, the Republican hero, Donald Trump, will be the first one to set this in motion. Will be the one to set this in motion. It's a giant club, and we're not in it. Just chattel to be experimented on, enslaved, and ultimately destroyed. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
And I said, well, we're not all like that. I mean, come on. Like the middle of Canada is pretty close to the States.
Alberta, I'm just talking. I'm only.
No. You got to try and include Saskatchewan.
You can come back here. I mean,
Very
a tough sell. It's like, it's like wingman, but your buddy's like kind of shitty and doesn't really have a job. Or you're trying to like hook him up with your wife's old for sister.
No. It's way better than that, dude. It's
all right. Sell me.
Oh, dude, all the mining and the resources and the fertilizer, like just for farming and fertilizer. I mean, it's amazing. Like really cold winters, like lots of tiny little towns. You could actually develop all these little towns into cool little hamlets. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of small towns spread all over the province. It's the weirdest province I've ever seen like that because it's all flat. Well, the lower half is all flattened prairie. So you could develop all these towns and expand in this prairie area.
All right, fine. You're in.
There we go.
All right.
Like the infrastructure is there to build all these little towns. Because, you got to admit, they've been desecrated probably over the last, not desecrated, but decimated over the last, few decades probably.
Nobody has asked me, though, for my opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we'll see.
So here's an email from Dawn. Hi, Graham. It's been a while since we last mailed. I listened to your interview with Nilesh Oak, which made me think of our exchange of insights, more specifically concerning the number. Darren, you got to listen to this one. 31,104,000. Oh, is that right? I thought it was 31 billion. He's got 31,104,000, which is the total number of seconds, 86,400 times 360 during a sacred year. So it's the number of seconds. So that's the Brahma. That's like the main, the highest level of the yugas, right? And numerically equal to the age of Brahma, billions of times bigger. Remember? During the past few months, I've been writing contributions on the official Graham Hancock website under the heading 144,000 seconds. In condensed topics, I explain my discoveries with regard to the system of time measure, which, as you know, not only describes time, but also distance using the very same numbers. For example, 86,400 seconds per day of rotation versus 86,400 times the circumference of the moon during 1 year of Earth's orbit around the sun. From your interview, I learned that the Indians still haven't got a clue where their own yuga system, periods of cosmic time, originated from, or what the deeper meaning of these numbers is. I've dealt with this specific issue in my series number 3 and 4 because the content fits neatly into my hypothesis. Once you see how it works, it's all perfectly logical. I can honestly say that these contributions are easy to read and understand, especially with the knowledge you already have. Maybe these will help you get a broader perspective and provide you with the answers to questions that even Indian scholars and professors have failed to understand. Finally, I would recommend my contributions on the measurements of the Great Pyramid, numbers 23 to 28. I'm certain that you will be positively surprised once again. I think I've read that. It's a lot of numbers. But I do like his work. Armed with this particular knowledge, you can challenge every Egyptologist, historian, or alternative researcher. Well, thanks, Don. So he says, all the best, Don. This is how it works. Go to Hancock's original official website, register yourself, go to message board, select mysteries, and look for 144,000 seconds. It's advisable to read numbers 1 and 2 first to refresh your memory. There you go.
There you have it. Thanks, Don. Any more? I mean, this is an email bonanza.
I know. Well, there's another one that I don't want to read. I can't remember why.
Why?
Well, and I don't have it up now. So
Is another one call me an asshole?
no, I just don't. I don't think it was content. Who? What? Preview? Can I? Oh, I found it. Here it is. Okay. Oh yeah, this is the subject is contact form. Whoa.
Whoa.
Graham, defenseless keeper of the archives, Dunlop. Did you just defend new Canadians for tipping garbage in random locations because $30 and the government should do something? Like, fuck, tour the subcontinent and get back to me. Darren, my war chief Grimes, you're the most Alberta bro I've met, a personification of everything great about the Alberta spirit. See, they need to ask you, the Indian cowboy, would you move back to Ontario and take your chances with a maternal hereditary dictatorship with UN approval?
Would I move to Ontario again?
What does that mean? What does that mean? Let me read that again. Would you move back to Ontario and take, it says tour chances, but I think he means your chances, with a maternal hereditary dictatorship with UN approval?
Does that mean like if I could go run my tribe?
Yeah, maybe. Oh, yeah, that must be what it is.
No, I'd stay here.
Libertarianism, feminism, and my stolen landism are concepts that only exist in free Christian nations introduced and cultivated by a single subversive tribe. Love you both. Sanford.
Yeah, no,
That's from Sanford, the daddy pig guy.
Things would have to change a lot before I would ever even consider. But I have no business running anything because I never spent a day of my life there. So I like it here in the plains where I belong. Horseback.
Big sky.
Big sky, baby. That's it. Support the show, motherfuckers. GrandAmerica.ca/support. Hit up them CBDs, like we're saying. GrandAmericaCBD.com. Tell your friends. We're hoping to get some other people shouting that out too pretty soon, but we need you guys' help to try and get this little fledgling partnership with True Hemp Science off the ground and, become an actual viable, hopefully, income stream for us down the road. Make sure it's not a flop. We don't want to flop this. And tell your friends. I mean, everybody knows someone who's into it. Send that link around for us. Let them know if you're not into it yourself. AmericaCBD.com. Of course, if you haven't heard about it before, check it out now. There's something else I wanted to mention. Oh, yeah. I fixed that thing too. So there's a link in the show notes, but you can also just do GrandAmerica.ca/shrooms now. Because I had a few people email me about the shroom link. So if you just do GrandAmerica.ca/shrooms, it will take you directly to the store. Not our store. Just a link to another store that, again, not our store. We are not selling mushrooms. A link to someplace where you can buy mushrooms, though. They are selling mushrooms, and they do ship to both Canada and the USA. So if you guys want to check that out, that's GrandAmerica.ca/shrooms. And, of course, most of the audiobooks, adultbrain.ca, and the other podcasts, AmericaOutlaw.ca. We have another YouTube channel going, the A-List, EH-list. And yeah, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I guess Adult Brain and Outlawed, and it's
busy. Dude, I gotta say, everyone really loved that last piece that I wrote on Substack. I've probably got the most feedback on that of anything I've ever put out.
But you put two pieces out very shortly, close together, right? Didn't you?
The second one, the longer one.
Okay, that's what I thought. So,
because I put out the short one, and then I was like, no, this could be expanded onto it.
Because you titled it differently too, which was you kind of took the gist of the first one, and made it into a better second one, right? And so, why don't you say the title of that?
Oh, I forget. Wait, one sec. Let me pull it up. It was like something about Confederation. Fucking Substack. I hate how they make email all the time.
What do you mean?
I can't just log in with a password ever.
Oh, I always have the I have it always have it open on my.
I'm in and out of a bunch of different Substacks, so that's the difference. I got the Gramerica newsletter, I got the Contact at the Cabin newsletter, and the Indigenous Opinions newsletter. So I got to say, I did get more likes and stuff on the first one, but I had like 5 people actually reach out to me and say how much they appreciated the second one.
Wow.
Which is always, what was Bill Loby this morning? And one was Lord Mike. Here it is. And I think we'll go over it a little more on our roundup show on Gramerica Outlawed, where we do a little more of that kind of stuff. It's pretty political, but it is a new confederation. Why joining the USA could save Canadian Indians, breaking the chains of confederation. I'll read just the first paragraph. Since its inception, Canada has cloaked itself in the guise of a benevolent nation that prides itself on multiculturalism and human rights. Yet for Indigenous peoples, this rhetoric rings hollow. From the signing of the first treaties to the present day, Canada's history is marked by systematic betrayal, a lack of accountability, and policies that perpetuate colonial control. Joining the United States represents a strategic departure from the unbroken cycle of exploitation, offering Canadian Indigenous nations a fresh opportunity to assert sovereignty and economic dependence. I mean, this really all came out of all the fucking meathead, because it's like everyone just takes the Indians for granted that they should just want to stay in Canada. That whole, because I was getting it, I think it all started over someone bitching about my Diagolong looking post there, because it's like, well, I think all them Indigenous nations up there will have something to say about that. And I was like, what the fuck? And it's, well, white people, right? It's all like to a letter. It's all fucking white people. And I was like, yeah, well, what the fuck you think you'll have to say? Maybe you can own your land and be somewhat sovereign and develop your own resources.
Well, because they do that. There's a big difference, right? I mean, I think it's worth.
Yeah, I wouldn't have wanted to been an Indian in the States 120 years ago or even 100 years ago. But now in present day, they've got it a lot fucking bad. They're constitutionally protected, so the kids can't be taken out of the fucking community, period. In Canada, there's still 55% of kids in the foster care system are fucking Indians taken off reserves and given away to people off of reserves. Now, that is what it is. It is like fucking.
Well, that's only one part of it too. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's that whole thing. The residential schools taking the kids to the fucking what was it called, the 60 scoop, taking the kids to now they're just doing it through all these other programs that they're starting to roll some of it back. But the U.S. did that, I think, 1978, enacted the law that was like, no, it's up to the fucking Indians to do what they want with their kids. Not to like run them into the, to a certain extent, but they had their own then child welfare system where if there was a situation where the children had to be taken from the home, they would be given to other people in the home on the fucking reservation.
Yeah. Bless you. So, and the other part really is about the land, right? Because the land is still, it's not, even though people
they own
think
the land, they can sell the resources. Yeah, I mean, that's huge. It's huge. And they have a certain level of sovereignty and jurisdiction over it, where you can go do stuff on the inland reserve that you can't do when you're not on it in some places. Or the casinos are a huge aspect of it. I mean, it's just for the Indians, it's a fucking no-brainer. It would honestly be a no-brainer. There's in my opinion anyway, any Indigenous person in Canada with all of the information in front of them, it would be an easy decision. Yeah, fucking join the States, and then boom, all of a sudden this land you're talking about is fucking your land. You can get away from this Indian Act. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm powering out the Substack, because a lot of the people that read that Substack are Indigenous people of fucking power in Canada, quote unquote power. There's a bunch of chiefs on there. There's a bunch of people on councils, that sort of thing. So, and it's cool because there's a bunch of teachers reading it too, because I added all those teachers in Alberta and most of them stayed subscribed. So, it's an interesting, I'm trying to pry that in there because I feel like it's at an all-time high. And
good. Yeah, that's a good one.
And I'm not saying that the solution is necessary that we should all join this. Even if you didn't end up joining the States, I think that it's a it's a moment in time where if all the bands in Canada could get together, there's a real chance. There's a real negotiating tool there.
Well, it's also going to have a knock-on effect for Canada too, because it's really giving Alberta a chance to push its separatist roots a little bit, and it's highlighting how messed up Canada is, right? When there's so many people that are saying, okay, like maybe this is an option here. It's highlighting how messed up it is. Like it really is just and you see the Canadian politicians scrambling around. They oh my God, have you seen some of their little conferences and their live streams they're doing? They're just a disaster.
Oh yeah, it's a shit show.
They just don't know how to handle any of this stuff. Not that I would. I'm not saying I would either, but you know, it's a mess.
It's so fucking.
It's almost like it was meant to be this way.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Great state of not tomorrow, the next day. The great state of Alberta is incoming.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. Remember when I was like, Trump's going to just win it this time around? I feel like that's like this thing that seems like it might take a long time. I think in some ways it's going to happen fast. Like you're going to see some places join the U.S. fucking fast. Maybe not Canadian places, but I think you could see Greenland and Panama Canal both being back in without
military intervention.
I think Greenland wants in. I think that, there's 45,000 people there. I think if they vote, they're going to be like, fuck yeah, man. What is Denmark doing for me?
Yeah.
I can move to any state. I can get the fuck out of here.
Okay. I'm excited for tomorrow or for Wednesday. Excited. I'm excited. I'll show you this egg. Oh, yeah.
There's got to be a better way to say that too.
So Gregory Shushan, Ph.D., is a historian of religions, an award-winning author, and the leading authority on near-death experiences and the afterlife across cultures and throughout history. His books include The Next World, Extraordinary Experiences of the Afterlife, Near-Death Experiences in Indigenous Religions, and Near-Death Experience in Ancient Civilizations. His forthcoming titles include the Historical Anthology of Near-Death Experiences and Mind, Dust, and White Crows. The Psychical Research of William James. He holds degrees in religious studies, research methods for the humanities, Egyptian archaeology, Eastern Mediterranean archaeology. Currently working towards his Ph.D. Well, I guess he's already got his Ph.D., I think. Yeah.
Ph.D.
With a project on near-death experiences in classical antiquity. Oh, yeah, that's what he was talking about, too. The Greeks and the Romans. Interesting. So, yeah, there you go. And his website is gregoryshushan.com. You can get the book at Inner Traditions, or you can just go to his website as well.
There you have it, guys. Enjoy the chat, support the show, but most of all, enjoy the chat with Gregory Shushan.
All right, Dr. Gregory Shushan, welcome to Grimerica. We are excited to have you here to talk about your upcoming book and your decades worth of research.
Thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this will be a blast. I mean, I'm just thinking I've got so many questions already, but I mean, maybe just a quick background of and maybe also how you feel NDE research and how that's come, because it's changed quite a bit. I mean, you've been into this for 25 years, and I think we've seen a pretty big shift in acceptance to this phenomenon.
Yeah, I think, it's a tricky question because I'm actually don't really consider myself like an NDE researcher. I'm a historian of religions who happen to like look at NDEs across cultures and throughout history. So I'm kind of coming at it from a very different angle than people like Raymond Moody or Kenneth Ring or Bruce Grayson. Um, but yeah, so from my perspective, the way the field hasn't changed is it hasn't started integrating cross-cultural and historical evidence very much. And that's where I kind of think that my work presents partly as something of a challenge to whatever paradigm you subscribe to, whether you think NDEs are real metaphysical experiences or if you think they're all in the brain. The cross-cultural stuff really needs to be taken into account, and it really isn't in most studies.
Yeah, that surprised me. I really thought that this would have been all teased apart already because
yeah,
I
mean, you would
it's,
think.
But I just still blows me away that people like scientists just deny the actual reality of it. You know, there's so much to me. There's so much evidence that points to some sort of extended consciousness thing. I feel like we've won that fight, but there's still people, I guess, hanging on to that materialistic paradigm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't even step into that stream unless I'm really kind of pushed on the question, and even then, I'm pretty equivocal about the whole thing.
Really, eh?
Yeah, just because my focus is really the way that NDEs have been influencing afterlife beliefs and other kinds of religious beliefs really throughout history, and that's been a kind of like, for one thing, it's been ignored in the humanities. In general, it's just kind of like an undercurrent that never really has risen to the top. And even like in the study of religions, there's this attitude that all experience, not even just, paranormal type experience, but any experience is just entirely generated by culture and language.
Yeah.
So you can't even say that there's a thing called a near-death experience on which people could be basing their beliefs. So it's a lot of things to push back against, really.
And it's more like a death experience at the end of the day. Really, it's like you kind of died. It's not like you like almost got hit by a car. It's like I feel like it's like you're it's more than near death. I think near death kind of under describes it.
Yeah, I think the language needs to be parsed a little bit more because in some cases it really is a temporary death experience according to how we measure death. Whereas they can also happen during deliberate kind of shamanic practices, and people can have them spontaneously when they're not even sick. People can have them when they think they're going to die, like if they're falling off a cliff, but then they land and they're not even hurt. They didn't kind of even lose consciousness. They can still have a kind of full blown NDE on the way down. So it's a lot more complex of a experience type than I think most people realize.
So before we dig into that, I'd like to, because you mentioned you're a historian, not really a near death guy. So I'd like to just kind of tease that out a bit of how you bridge that gap. Like what sort of historian stuff were you doing when that made you think about this ND stuff? Because most of the people we talk to when it comes to near death experience, they either had a near death experience or they know somebody who had a near death experience, or they're, kind of just wacky. And then they're like set out to, maybe not wacky, I shouldn't say that, but they've like set out to research near death experiences as a research thing.
Right.
But this, to come at it from this angle, I'm just curious what that sort of looked like.
Yeah. I mean, I had known about NDEs, since I was a teenager or whatever, and just kind of seeing flatliners and just, reading Moody's book. It's all kind of in the popular imagination of culture nowadays, and has been for, 50 years, basically, since Moody first wrote his Life After Life book. But my kind of, research involvement in it came, my first degree was in Egyptian archaeology, and this was in London at University College London. And I was reading, texts about the afterlife and description of what the afterlife is like. And basically these books they're books of the dead type things. I was looking at the earlier ones like the coffin texts and pyramid texts, and they're designed to kind of help the soul navigate their way through the other world and achieve, a sort of optimal afterlife. And so as I'm reading this, I'm kind of thinking, oh, it's interesting. They travel through darkness in these caves, these subterranean realms. They enter where there's a being of light who's the sun god. They meet their deceased relatives there. They're also associated with the god Osiris. Like they're told like you are Osiris basically, and at that point they encounter the corpse of Osiris in the other world. So that's seen as what I saw that as like a out of body experience symbol. So like you're encountering your own corpse, which is in the form of Osiris in the Egyptian ideology, and then recognizing that you are one and the same with this god, meaning that you're dead and yet still alive, is what allows you to kind of continue on. And that's often how it is in NDEs. People see their dead body, and that's what makes them realize, wait a minute, I'm actually dead, but my consciousness has survived. So basically, yeah, I just kind of put together these connections that made me think like, if there are all these similarities between Egyptian afterlife beliefs and NDEs, I wonder if like they could be basing their beliefs on this kind of experience, and then also like how far can I take that in different cultures around the world?
Right. And creating religion and everything. I mean, so because I was mentioning to you, like we just put out Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Tibetan Book of the Dead out on audio. So I narrated both of those, and I was thinking about NDEs constantly. I'm like, this is like from an NDE. Like and when we look at the modern stuff that we know about NDEs, like people coming back with maybe powers, like maybe special powers. Some claim to have healing powers. Some have clairsentience or audience or who knows what. And then they there's some more themes I'll talk about later, but then they claim to be sent back. Their work's not done, but then you wonder about this Egyptian stuff, and you're thinking, what about all those people that might have come back from NDEs back then and had powers, or what were they looked upon? Like, were they looked upon like demigods, or that could have created all these religions, right? The hell, the Hades, the Amenta, all this subterranean stuff. Like, could be you going back and experiencing like in Egypt, your heart is being weighed against a feather. Like it seems like it could all be connected with like NDEs and the afterlife knowledge coming from NDEs.
Right. Yeah, and that's another example. The heart being weighed by the feather is kind of like conceptually similar to a life review, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's even a text that says it's called the Teaching for King Merikare, and it says something like his lifetime was laid out before him in an hour, as these deities are helping him to kind of assess his past deeds. But I should also add, just to clarify, that there aren't any examples of actual NDEs from ancient Egypt, because they didn't write about stuff like that. They didn't have like personal narratives. So what we have is the ancient texts that describe the afterlife, which has similarities to NDEs. But yeah, there's not like so it's really to some degree it's a matter of interpretation.
So do you think it wasn't just named something else, or they called it something else, or like?
There's just no
there's no reference.
Yeah, I mean, writing was basically used for like religious ritual texts and for accounting and government stuff. So they're just like, and a few literary tales, stories like the story of the shipwrecked sailor where he meets a snake on an island and things like that. But for the most part, yeah, there wasn't like, your diary or reporting about what was going on in the society, nothing like that. It was just really restricted use of writing. And it's partly because hardly anybody was literate.
So same with like, when does it start? When do they start writing about it? Like, do they do it in Greece and Rome, or in the classical period, or did they?
Yeah, it's well, later in later Egyptian period, there's a couple of stories. There's one about a magician who goes to the underworld, but it seems to be that he goes in his body, and it's very much like a moralizing sort of tale. That's kind of like the nearest you get in Egypt at all, which is kind of surprising considering how focused they were on death and the afterlife
and the body. And like, because I thought maybe they're keeping the body so that somebody has time to come back into it, or so that they recognize it as a symbol. Like you said, they see the Osiris, so then they know like, I have to move on now. Like, they're not getting stuck in this like half limbo type area.
Yeah. The body has to be maintained so the soul can be maintained while it's in the other world. But as far as like the first actual example of an ND, it might be, you've probably heard of the Epic of Gilgamesh from ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia. Even earlier than the Epic of Gilgamesh, there were these stories of about Bilgamesh, which was his Sumerian name, and it's believed that he was an actual real king. And so there's an account called The Death of Bilgamesh, where he is lying there on his deathbed, and his soul goes to the other world, and he encounters beings of light in the shape of these deities who then review his life, and they help him kind of ask him things about his deeds on Earth, things that he accomplished, and then they use that information to determine what his afterlife fate is going to be. And so at that point, they make him into an otherworld judge. But then at that point, he goes back to Earth, wakes up in his body, and he has to like kind of put his affairs in order, build his monuments in his tomb, and then presumably he dies later. But that's the first one that's kind of a narrative about a historic person, somebody who really lived, and contains the kind of context of a near-death experience where he dies and comes back to life, and then also contains some of those familiar features. And he also meets his relatives as well. So there's 6 or 7 very typical NDE features in that story.
Right. So what about after him? Like, what's next in line? And I saw a reference in my research. I saw a reference to Thespesius. I think Plutarch was talking about Thespesius.
Yeah. There's some in Greece. There's Plato's Myth of is another really early one. Sorry, my dog's barking over there. There's
okay.
Who wants to come on the show?
Yeah. There's quite a few from ancient China, from maybe 8th century BCE. So, and then a few from India, which are the ones from India are a little more clearly mythological, but they also seem to have a kind of an NDE basis, or at least knowledge of NDEs that people are kind of elaborating on these stories. But so it's at a certain point they start kind of accelerating in as far as how they're documented. And that's especially the case in China. In China, there were, dozens and dozens of accounts and whole books that have not even been translated.
Wow.
Medieval Chinese texts. So
fascinating.
Yeah. And from Greece as well, there's quite a few. And it's interesting. I was just working on the myth of because my next book is going to be about near-death experience in ancient Greece and Rome. And the myth of seems to be the earliest one in Plato's Republic, as I mentioned. And throughout Greek and Roman history, from Plato onwards, there's this debate about whether this was a real story, whether was a real person, where he came from, what the story meant, if it was just symbolic philosophy and poetry. So even then, there was a consciousness of the experience, and they were taking them seriously as a source of knowledge. And there was a debate about them, just as there is now, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It was probably like a lot more accepted in all of those cultures that you could just you guys would just be sitting around, and it was just probably, you were able to just openly discuss it. It wasn't like this weird taboo thing that you got to, sneak around, and only certain people and some, no one was calling you crazy. I feel like in any of those cultures.
In Greece, they definitely were. Yeah.
Were they?
Greece, yeah. There was a lot of ridicule about it, and people kind of. There's one text in Lucian where the scenario is a bunch of philosophers are sitting around discussing the weird shit that people believe, and he says, so and so believes that a gigantic person came striding through the landscape, this huge giant, and somebody else believes about falling into a chasm into the underworld, and then that's what prompts them to say, well, I heard this story about somebody who died and came back to life. So basically the point was these stories of NDEs are just as crazy as all this other stuff. So yeah, there was definitely debate going on about whether they were ridiculous stories, like some people say now, or whether they were things that really happened.
Because it has changed quite a bit since the age of reason and enlightenment and all that. I mean, I think we're reaching a new point now where people will talk about it again. Like it's opening back up. But I mean, for a couple hundred years there, well, I don't know. There was also, quite a revival with spiritualism and all that as well in the 1800s. But so I kind of flip-flop back and forth too. But I think you did mention that the modern NDs are a little bit different, right? Is some of that? Could you maybe say that some of that is because of our materialistic conditioning? Because I would say that, like, Darren's right about maybe a lot of the other cultures. Like, don't a lot of the other cultures in the world believe in the afterlife anyways?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and what Darren was saying is definitely applicable to like a lot of the Native American cultures.
You're right.
My book before this one is Near-Death Experience in Indigenous Religions, and I looked at Native American, African, and Pacific cultures, and tried to look at them at like the earliest times when missionaries and explorers and like the early anthropologists were interviewing people in these societies, kind of before they were heavily influenced by Christianity or Islam or whatever. Yeah, and in those cases, in Native America and especially Polynesian cultures, there was a lot of just acceptance that, of course, these experiences happen, and also just overt statements that this is how we know about the afterlife because, so and so, this named individual who we knew a couple of years ago died and came back to life, and he told us what it was like. So we know what it's like. So it was an almost casual thing, and they use that to combat missionary teachings. And so missionaries would come and say, you need to believe in this heaven and hell afterlife, and the teachings of Jesus was this, that, and the other. And the Native Americans would be saying, well, actually, no, that was a couple thousand years ago, and why should we believe that when we know somebody who was there just recently? So, which is actually really logical when you think of it. But the missionaries, they didn't buy it.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's used as like a political pushback, really, against the colonizers.
Does the belief in it change the experience?
That's a tricky question, actually, because I think it probably does. But atheists will have NDEs. People who have no even inkling of a belief in an afterlife will still have an NDE. But they tend to maybe see like a generic being of light rather than Jesus or Krishna or the Buddha or whatever. But they definitely do differ as far as going back to your earlier question that, for example, the life review I mentioned earlier, the kind of popular idea that we have of a life review of like your whole life playing before your eyes in a flash. And then a lot of contemporary NDEers say that they also felt everything that they had inflicted on other people. So if they were mean to someone, they felt that person's distress and sorrow or whatever. That's pretty much absent across cultures. What there is a kind of a much broader notion of like accounting for your life or some kind of evaluation of what your life was like and the deeds that you did or whatever role you had in the community. Sometimes it's even like, did you perform the correct rituals?
Wow.
Did you perform the rituals correctly? Like in India, this is a big thing. If you didn't perform the rituals correctly, then if you didn't burn the weeds properly or whatever, the herbs, then they'll start strangling you in the afterlife. This kind of thing. So so that's one difference. Another one is that I find really interesting is the idea of a tunnel. So like we have this, again, popular idea almost universally. Everyone will think of the light at the end of the tunnel in a near-death experience. But cross-culturally, that's really not the case. There's a lot of examples, especially in ones from the Pacific and Native Americans, where they describe that they walked along a road to the other world. And they'll say like, I could see the footprints in the sand of all the other souls who had walked to the other world before me. And then sometimes they'll see somebody else who's having a near-death experience on their way back. Like they're walking to the other world and somebody else is walking back on this path back to their body. So yeah, no tunnel, but the concept of getting from this world to another world, this kind of means of transportation is the same. It's just not often a tunnel.
Wow. Darren, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Can you, because I'd like to hear some more about the myth of what was one from because I'm curious to unpack like the more into the myth from the Greek guys there, that the ones
the myth of Ur,
that aren't into it.
Yeah, the myth of Ur is so basically it's follows a discussion about basically criticizing poetry and imaginative texts and things like this, and then it's a discussion about the survival of the soul after death and the nature of the soul, and it's between Socrates and Plato's brother, supposedly. but it's written by Plato. But it's sort of presented as like he's quoting what Socrates told him. So then Socrates tells the brother, I'm going to tell you this account of what happened to this guy, and it's not going to be like the story of Odysseus going to the other world, which is from Homer, and I take that as him meaning this is going to be true. It's not going to be like that myth. So then he says there was this soldier and his name was and he gives the name of his father, and he tells us where he's from. And then he describes how he was found dead on a battlefield and he was taken back to his home. And he gives like these little details, and those details are what make me feel like this may be based on an actual experience. So he also says that his, unlike the other bodies on the battlefield, his body hadn't started to decompose, and there was still a little bit of warmth in it. So that's also a kind of, I think, indication of like he's presenting this as something true.
Yeah.
But then, so he leaves this body and he comes back to life, and he tells the story of the other world. And some of it is familiar from what we know about NDEs, but a lot of it is just like Plato riffing on his philosophy of the soul and the cosmos and life after death. And he describes like the workings of the universe, which he calls the spindle of necessity. It's like this giant mechanism that's turning the cosmos in the sky, and with a huge beam of light through it. I mean, it's really kind of pretty trippy sort of stuff, and very much like any NDE that we know. And then he starts talking about the three fates, which are ancient Greek figures. And then he meets Odysseus himself in the other world. He meets and he's talking about how each of these people from Greek history and mythology are choosing their new incarnation, who they're going to be reborn as. And he meets Orpheus and all these other kind of legendary and mythological figures. So it's really this combination of mythological and NDE elements, I think.
Yeah. Huh.
So,
are there any parallels we can draw between those, like between the old ones and the new ones?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just the basics of having the basic context of that it's somebody is said to be dead. He leaves his body, he sees the light, and he meets deceased relatives and comes back to the body, and he was also sent back with a particular mission that he's supposed to like tell his people about the afterlife, and that there is no death, and they're gonna transcend this body in the other world, basically, which is a really common thing in modern NDEs.
Wow.
So I think the way to look at it is like, if you look at it thematically, like the themes are pretty much the same everywhere, but the specifics of those of the way they're expressed is really in cultural and individual symbolic terms.
Crazy.
I feel like this is important work. I feel like we need as a people to believe in it not be so nihilistic that this is the end, that there is something afterwards. Has your beliefs changed while doing all this research at all?
No, not really. I really try to not let my beliefs impact the research at all.
Right.
So I've kind of, I mean, obviously I think about it in serious metaphysical terms.
Yeah.
And I've written about it a little bit, but I really try to just like not put a foot on either side of the argument and just steer the middle path, because in a way it's irrelevant to what I'm saying and what I'm arguing. But I do think it has a serious impact on near-death studies, or it should, because basically every book about NDEs, any theorizing that's done is based entirely on like this Western hypothetical model that goes way back to Raymond Moody.
Yeah.
And nobody says like, okay, another example of a difference is, in the West, contemporary NDEs that we're familiar with, people are sent back to their body because, they have to spread the news, or they have to take care of somebody, they have to look after their kids, or there's always some kind of like almost personal development kind of reason. But in a lot of other societies, like there's some ancient Chinese accounts and some from India, it's a case of mistaken identity, the reason that they're sent back. So the being of light or the relative or whatever, they're not saying like you need to go back and fulfill this. It's not your time to die. They're basically saying we got the wrong Gregory Shushan and we have to go get the one who lives in upstate New York. So you go back to your body, and then the other person with my name is then going to die permanently. So, and contemporary near-death studies, I've never seen any, scientific or popular work on NDEs that takes those diversities and differences into account. And I think they need to, because it's supposed to be a universal human phenomenon, and they're basing it on this stereotypical Western model.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I'll throw out the research that I did and at you and see what you think about it. I'm really interested to hear your opinion on it. And what I found was a sort of a pattern that was happening. I was reading these books on ancient wisdom. So like, let's say like Theosophy, Manly P. Hall, so magic and mythology and all this kind of stuff. And I was noticing this pattern of 3 days.
Uh-huh.
So 3 days came up, but it came up in terms of what really connected it to me was the resurrection and initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started compiling all these texts that I had that were referencing 3 days, I mean, it was unbelievable. Like there were so many of them.
Yeah.
And they were talking about, to me, NDE kind of fits in with it. It kind of fits in with it because there was, I found a bunch of NDE accounts going back, like not any ones probably that you haven't seen or whatever, but just ones that I referenced in my books. And there was so many of them that were about 3 days. Right.
Yeah.
And they had, and then they had the resurrection at 3 days and the initiation at 3 days. So it seemed to me like to get initiated, it seemed to me like, they were trying to manifest a resurrection type transformation through a 3-day initiation, like almost copying an NDE.
Mm.
And the weird thing was that happened is, and what put it all together for me is we had a guy on named Vinnie Tolman who had a modern NDE. I don't know if you ever heard of his account.
No.
And he says, and after 3 days, I woke up out of the coma, and then I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I've been reading in these old ones, right?
Yeah.
And I was putting the 3 days at, the main reason it was 3 days was a lunar or a solar kind of symbolism from that.
Uh-huh.
In December when the sun sort of stops and it starts heading back, stops for 3 days, the new moon's kind of goes black for 3 days. Like,
yeah.
So, but anyways, I'm trying to find a decent question in here, but I guess, is there anything to maybe what I'm thinking about the resurrection and the initiation and did you notice 3 days in all this? Because I was seeing the NDEs, which to me almost could be like a resurrection.
For sure.
Myth, right? Like maybe they were calling it resurrection instead of near-death experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I should say that's been one of the huge challenges of my research is there was no term for near-death experience, before Raymond Moody. So when I'm looking at a 19th century ethnography, I have to just basically read everything that it says about their religion and afterlife beliefs. And somewhere I might run across, an example of somebody who died and came back to life. But yeah, as far as the 3 days thing goes, that's true. I have run across it a lot in a lot of NDE accounts cross-culturally. And I read I can't remember what it was, but it was an anthropological work from, earlier days, 50s or 60s, I think. And they were saying, not from the point of NDEs or anything, but they were saying basically that the reason that that's a kind of recurring trope in myths and stories like this is because that's how many days until the body starts to decompose.
Right.
In a lot of environments. So it would then be stretching credibility if they were to say he was dead for 10 days.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I did not come across that, but I kind of did because there was an ad in one of the books I read for a cremator, and he was talking about how the occultists wait for 3 days because at that point, like there's a chance that the soul can come back into the body.
Right.
And then they cremate it. So there's a technical reason why they wait 3 days, but I don't think it was about decomposing, but that kind of fits with that.
Yeah.
And then there was also there's also the spiritual battles that are happening. They say that there's there's all these angels versus other entities happening during this 3 days as well or something.
Yeah. And then it's kind of on the opposite of what I said about the myth of Ur, where the intention, I think, of Plato was to show that it was a true story by saying he wasn't decomposing like the other ones, because I think it would be too outlandish for people to accept that. But then on the other side of that coin, there's some from different parts of the world. I know there's some from, I think one from Hawaii, different ones in Polynesia, where they make a point of saying the corpse had already started to decompose and he came back to life.
Wow.
The intention of that is basically to say, this is how blown away you should be by this story. Basically, like, this is an extreme miracle. And so there's a way of like enhancing the miraculous nature of what they're saying, rather than, anchoring it in something that's true. Even though
because there's modern examples where it's quite a ways, right? People come out of comas or whatever after, like, we're keeping people on life support, whereas I guess they wouldn't have back then.
Yeah. There's a really gruesome account
buried him.
Was that?
They'd have just buried him and they just wake up in a coffin.
Yeah, and sometimes in some societies in Africa and Micronesia, there was like a fear of the dead returning to life.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you about. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they would bind their hands and feet or tie their arms and legs together, and then pile stones on the grave and like basically do everything to ensure that person's not going to come back. So
wow.
If they were going to have an NDE, they're not going to now. So
wow.
Yeah.
Well, because I was going to ask you about the opposite to that, because what I also started coming across was there was a lot of people that were sort of popping out of their graves, or they were like, they would sit up right before they're getting buried, or and it seemed to me like there was a fear of being buried alive too with people. And this might've been more of like in the 17th, 18th centuries, or maybe even 19th century. And they even made they even made special burial chambers with like a wheel that you could actually like get out of if you woke up in there.
Yeah. And some Victorian coffins have a bell in it that you can ring to alert people. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. But it's also interesting that there's so few, like from Victorian and Edwardian psychical research in the UK and here actually, there's almost no focus at all on near-death experiences. It's all about evidential mediumship. And I don't know if that ties in with just being too freaked out about the idea of resurrection and premature burial, or if it's just that they thought that mediumship was going to give them better evidence. But it's a pretty interesting lack of,
Yeah, that is, because I would think that the NDE would also bring back evidence. I mean, we've seen read accounts where people have seen things and done things that couldn't be, accounted for physically.
Yeah, for sure.
Huh. Wow, that's fascinating.
I mean, Frederick Myers, he mentions them in some of the early Society for Psychical Research literature, but it's just like a brief mention, and then he moves on. So.
What about like zombies? Is that what the Africans were getting at? Like, so that was not like a good NDE that were like was just like, holy shit, Bob's alive, and they freaked out, or was it like Bob came back and he was a zombie?
Basically that it's not even Bob anymore, that his body has been taken over by an evil spirit, or it's been reanimated by a sorcerer, and so it's not even that person, it's just a walking corpse, and it's going to wreak havoc on the community unless we stop it from happening. And there's even a few accounts where it's said people were stoned to death after they came back to life because they were just terrified that and it wasn't that they speculated that was what was going on. They just assumed that's what happens if you see a walking dead person, they're possessed. And this even kind of I think it was a 2006 or maybe 1996, one date like that. There's a scholar named James McLennan, who's a sociologist, and he did a study in the Congo about near-death experiences. And one family he was talking to, they had a near-death experience in the family. And this was like, a Christianized modern family. And when that person came back to life, they all fled because they were terrified that it was a reanimated corpse.
Right.
And it took a while for the person to explain, like, no, it's actually really me. And then they were happy and welcomed him back into the family. But, some of this stuff runs deep, just like, Catholic guilt or whatever.
Right.
These kind of get reignited throughout the generations.
So what do you think about the the initiations then being 3 days, and if the resurrection is 3 days, like, and I mean, it's officially kind of the mythology of it is officially 3 days. I don't know why, but do you think the resurrection could be an NDE, and do you think that that's why they made like why they would have tried to make initiations like that? Like they would send you to the dark sort of cellar, scare the shit out of you for 3 days with no food or sleep or whatever, and then you would come out basically like a new man.
Yeah, that's actually a parallel too that I'm writing about with Greece and Rome. That the ancient mystery cults
Yeah.
basically, when you go through that initiation process, you come out on the other end qualified to have a better afterlife, and you've kind of, you're going to die consciously, like in Tibetan Book of the Dead, maybe, but it transforms your whole future afterlife experience, and that involves going down into the darkness of the cave. You're probably drugged as well,
Yeah.
and disoriented, and you're kind of primed to have this transformational mystical experience. And then at some point, according to some of the texts, there's a bright light and like a revelation of a deity in the darkness, again, which is very similar to an NDE.
Yeah.
And I think and other scholars have said this before me, actually, that this very likely could be like a reenactment of an NDE, basically.
Okay. Yeah. So that is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I started calling it like the something like the shamanic replication hypothesis.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Even though it's not maybe technically shamanism, it's a similar type of thing, and it's also reflected in like Native American ghost dance tradition,
Okay.
The Indian Shaker Church. They basically modeled these religious practices on the NDE of a prophet who founded the cult or the tradition.
Well, I mean, the big one is probably Jesus, right?
Yeah, and that's you asked if the resurrection was an NDE. That's really interesting because almost like what I was saying about the Egyptians, this whole religion is based on the resurrection of this one man, basically, and you need faith in that resurrection to be, a proper Christian. But what happened while he was dead, and between the time he died and came back to life? And there are like a couple of hints in the New Testament. They call it the harrowing of hell, where he goes to the underworld and frees the souls of sinners. But it's in the Gospel of Nicodemus is like where the fuller version of this happens, and that's considered like an apocryphal text. It was deleted from the official version of the Bible, and I wonder if that's because when they started, codifying the Bible and deciding like what really is the Bible and what we're going to delete from it, they were maybe more concerned with the teaching that like everyone has to go through Jesus to be saved and to have a positive afterlife experience. If you don't accept Jesus, you're going to go to hell. Because NDEs suggest that you go right to the deity yourself. You don't need an intermediary. So that's why I wonder if maybe Christianity would have been more of an NDE based religion if it hadn't been tweaked at a certain point.
Right. I find that fascinating. Or they need to control it or bring it through the church to control the thing. Because otherwise, if it was open to just people like experimenting on their own, because especially if people do have special powers when they come back. I mean, I've heard enough examples myself where I kind of believe it. I'm like, well, seems to be happening. I mean, I talked to people for hours that have come back with like crazy premonitory abilities or all kinds of stuff. So, they would know that back then, I would think, the church, the mystics, they would know that like we have to be careful about too many people knowing about this. I mean, that might be one of the reasons why they kept it in the mystery schools as well, some of these things, because they don't want people just experimenting on their own and coming back with all these powers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And they could also create a rival to Jesus, basically. If there's a new prophet coming along, people might start following him instead and donating less money to the church and what have you. And they were actually proved correct in that, because then later on you get the Mormons. And, part of Mormon teaching is that direct revelation can still happen today. And therefore Mormons embrace NDEs. NDEs are kind of integrated into their beliefs, which is pretty unique in Christianity.
What did you call it? Direct revelation?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So they don't want it they don't buy the idea that all this supernatural revelation stuff happened only back in biblical times.
Right.
They're saying because they need it to be the case because their founders were from the 19th century having these kinds of experiences. So they need to kind of bring that to the fore, basically.
And in a lot of ways that fits. I mean, it fits more than, people are having these experiences all the time. I mean, the modern NDE research, I mean, the database I went through was unbelievable how many people are reporting this stuff and how many modern examples I found of 3 days as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, go to the NDERF website and it's overwhelming. And then, when I started, I was originally thinking, I'm going to find a few cross-cultural examples, and there were a few studies before I started this work. There's one by Jenny Wade, and she found, I think, 5 Native American examples, and I kind of thought, like, that's probably all there is out there. But the more I dug, and I found like 70 Native American examples. So, considering that I was looking just at these anthropological and missionary and explorer texts, that's quite a lot. Considering how many there are in contemporary society, but still it's hardly anything. And I think if we had more complete records from earlier times, then we would find that people were having NDEs more commonly than we realize. Although medical resuscitation has really improved nowadays, so I'm sure a lot more have them now than in the past.
Yeah.
How big of a role did the psychedelics play in some of that? In some of these cultures, was like. Because you can see some of these cultures are using that to do maybe a metaphorical NDE and metaphorical resurrection sort of thing as well, and powerful doses of psychedelics are very much like they call it an ego death and things like that. So, but did you find a lot of any of that, or to the coinciding of the two throughout any of the research?
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, like, the ghost dance, I don't know specifically that they took any drugs, but Indian Shaker Church, I think, does peyote. I'm not sure, but definitely in a lot of there's a few African examples of taking this drug called ibogaine, which is named after the deity Iboga, and they would take massive quantities to the point that for all intents and purposes they were pretty much dead and having an NDE. So yeah, the drugs definitely play a part. I think they supplement it though rather than cause it, because you take the drug planning on having this experience, and then you have these rituals that kind of cement it, and so it's kind of steering the trip in a way. And then some examples of physically bringing it about without drugs. Like one of them told an anthropologist that they traveled to the other world by being clubbed to death. We club each other to death. And obviously death was, metaphorical, or at least, a different meaning, because they would come back to life. But, clubbed insensible with the plan of
they
having
should try choking. It's a little more controllable, you'd think.
Yeah, they probably did that too. I mean, there's others where they would cut off their circulation with, tying it off. So there's definitely like physical deprivations that are deliberately induced to try to bring about near-death like experiences, and sometimes in order to like go after the soul of somebody who's having an NDE, somebody who's dying, and the belief is they can go to the other world and chase the soul down and bring it back to the body.
There was some, before I forget to mention it, there was some physiological stuff that I was kind of coming up with that 3-day thing as well. Like there is like a weird, like if you fast for 3 days, for example, like apparently it resets your immune system, autophagy sets in. So there is like a weird 72-hour sort of health marker as well, which kind of fits strangely enough. And I mean, who knows why that, I mean, and then I started to get into like the solar. Well, maybe it is solar and lunar and the whole, and it's a cycle that it affects everything, maybe it affects all these other little cycles in our bodies too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. The gut biome changes, all kinds of stuff.
After 3 days of being dead, I bet.
Well, I mean, you're fasting while you're dead, surfing those other realms, I mean,
you're definitely
not getting any nutrients.
Although if your relatives are bringing offerings to your grave, then you're not fasting, because
Yeah.
those offerings are going to reach your soul in the other world.
Yeah. Aaron, do you have any questions?
Do you think we kind of talked about the similarities between the two? Do you think, because there was definitely a huge difference in how these sort of cultures just thought about death in general? Do you think that, I mean, it's kind of the same question, but maybe in a different direction. But do you think that do you think it's sort of cheapened today, maybe in some ways with this? Because I feel like nowadays we've got a fear of death that maybe none of those cultures had. I mean, maybe you'll correct me on that one as well, but it seems like they were all maybe not eager to die, but they definitely didn't seem to be as scared of it. And how much of that do you think tends to the level of religion and spirituality that was hanging around back then? Because I mean, today there's a lot of Christians, but how many of them really believe? And even, like the level of believers, it might be at an all-time high, but the amount of them that actually think that, there's an afterlife or are practicing and living by those things is a lot lower. So
Yeah.
it seems to be a consequence of the culture these days, but they didn't seem to have that those days, save maybe the late Romans. So I'm wondering, I don't know if there's a question there or not, but maybe you could just sort of expand on that and tell me if I'm an idiot.
No, I think it's true. People are less spiritually religious today than they used to be. I mean, the things that evangelical Christians, I mean, not to single out one particular group, but the things that evangelical Christians get upset about and talk about are the antithesis of the teachings of Jesus. I mean, that's almost a cliche. If you were to read the teachings of Jesus to a lot of so-called Christians on the Sermon on the Mount, they would really not relate to any of it, and they would, probably call Jesus all kinds of names, and write him off as some, woke pansy or something. But I think it's interesting, because I think there is a correlation between NDEs and not having a fear of death, and that's evident from most people who have NDEs. That's one of the most common things they say when they come back, is that they're no longer afraid to die. But to just kind of flag the diversity again, to bring up the African civil societies again. I mentioned they didn't really have this emphasis on NDEs, and a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to have NDEs because of their burial practices and everything. But they also didn't really have a fear of death. They had the fear of the walking corpses that we talked about, but they had an acceptance of death that's like far outstrips anything that we have, to the point that, like, if somebody, an older person, just like had enough, they'd go lie down in the forest and just like lie there until it was time to die, and just kind of let nature take over. And missionaries would come by and say, look, we can cure you. You just need some penicillin or whatever it is. And like, oh, leave me alone. I'm going to die. And then also there were practices where they would take the body and just like throw it out to the hyenas or whatever. Like, it's just a very different kind of mindset, where they're not hung up on the same things we're hung up on. They're hung up on different things.
Yeah. Are they? Yeah, I wonder how they are.
Well, the walking corpse thing and all that.
Yeah.
And when I say, I'm saying present tense, but I'm kind of referring to past societies, really, because it's very different now, obviously.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways that was healthier. Like, I don't think it's healthy to have this fear. I mean, it must, create anxiety, and everybody's kind of scared of all these things when.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's a lot of, there's the term toxic theology that people talk about, where, you live your life being afraid of the punishment that you might have after you die,
Right. Yeah. And then there's the other side of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, that can't be healthy. It can't be a healthy mentality to go through life with, and then to be so afraid of dying once you actually get there. Whether that's because you're afraid of being judged and punished, or if it's just like you're afraid of oblivion, or whatever it is. You're right. Just like this, living in fear all the time is not a healthy way to be in life.
What did we miss out of your book? Your book that's coming out in February is what's it called? Near death experience in ancient civilizations.
Right. Yeah.
The origins of the world's afterlife beliefs. Oh, I love that subtitle. This is important.
Thanks. Yeah. But yeah, basically, I guess I didn't really just describe what it does. So it looks at the earliest periods of development and the earliest religious texts of these different ancient civilizations. So Egypt, ancient Sumer and Old Babylon, ancient China before Buddhism, India before Hinduism, and the Mesoamerican cultures of Aztec and Mayan. And I chose those because they were basically didn't have much cultural contact. So nobody can say like, the Mayans just believe what they believe because they got it from the Egyptians. That just didn't happen. There wasn't like this sharing of myths. So the idea was to look at their afterlife beliefs and then look at them in light of near-death experiences and see, how much they corresponded to them. But then also in most of the societies, except Egypt, as I mentioned, to also look at examples of near-death experiences, whichever ones I could find in each one, and how they wrote about them and the kind of attitudes towards the experiences, and if there's any evidence that they really did influence their afterlife beliefs in any kind of wider way. So, and there is the spoiler.
If you could find some lost scrolls about the afterlife or spirituality in some cave somewhere, which culture would you pick? Which one do you think has the most missing, or maybe the most
revelatory,
revelatory
potential for
most potential for revelatory, whatever.
Wow, that's a tough question. Although I'd probably say Egypt, just because it's always the outlier because of their, the limited use of text I mentioned. So it'd be amazing to be able to
rule
know
out that they weren't like reincarnating themselves in some. It seems they seem to be the most obsessed with death out of all of them.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair to say, given the expense and energy and thought, and I mean, so much of their religious texts are about the afterlife. I mean, you've got from the pyramids texts all the way to the late period texts of the Amduat and these kind of things. They're basically saying and elaborating on the same things for more than 3,000 years, which is pretty amazing. But it's an interesting thing about that, though, is like the earliest texts were they were more reserved for the upper classes of society, the priests and kings, and they were mostly just carved in pyramids. And then gradually they became accessible to more people. And as that happened, it seems like the ruling elite and the priestly class started introducing more and more ideas about punishment and hell. And I think that was, a kind of controlling of the populace kind of move. And that's also mirrored in China and other places, that the more popular access to the afterlife becomes, or to afterlife wisdom becomes, the more there is this like threat of hell and promise of heaven kind of stuff.
They all seem to have their Hades, right?
Yeah. And it's manipulated, by the people in charge.
Wow, that's fascinating. And what is the gist of that you go into hell when you die? You're going to go into hell, and then you got to sort of make your way back out of it.
It depends on the culture. In a lot of the Egyptian texts, it's like annihilation is the worst thing to happen. So there's a lot of threats to being annihilated.
Would that be like being cremated?
No, I think just total non-existence was the fear. And there's even they even talk about it like in really kind of explicit terms in that way. So
wow,
yeah, and that's also kind of mirrored in some of the ancient Indian texts. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Whereas in China, it's more about like, if you gossiped, you're going to get a hot iron rod through your tongue. If you punched your mother, you're going to get your arm lopped off. It's like the punishment will fit the crime, and it's really, really gory detail as time goes on. So,
did you encounter any personal stories or experiences in your research that kind of like really hit home on a profound level or shook you up or changed your belief system in any way?
I don't know so much about that. The process has actually been the more I read different texts around the world, the more I read different NDEs, the more I'm convinced of what I've been arguing, which might sound a little arrogant, but it's kind
No,
of the
that's
case.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and kind of validating this idea that, people have been basing their afterlife beliefs on NDEs around the world since as long as there have been humans, which is completely rational and reasonable. And to my way of thinking, there's nothing like woo about it. It's just
No.
like people have these experiences. Why wouldn't they base their beliefs on them? So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think happens when you die?
I think judging by NDEs, you're going to have this amazing experience where you feel like, you're connecting with the divine and maybe seeing your deceased relatives and having this like mind expanding universal awareness. And then after that, I don't know. It could be that like that's the last thing, and everybody has this profound magical experience at the last moment, or it could be that that is the prelude to something beyond. But I think,
Well, the prelude to something beyond begs the question of if you're going to keep going on this research, because this sort of forks off into other stuff, right? There's the reincarnation aspect of it, and the stories of people remembering their past lives, and especially in children and stuff like that. So I'd be curious about what that looked like in ancient history.
Yeah, I've actually looked a little bit. Not so much, again, kind of coming at it from a slightly different angle. Um, like the work of Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker and these people, very much trying to validate the accounts and trying to find historical matches to the things that the children say that will prove that they were who they remembered, identifying the personality. But to me, what was the interesting part was their intermission memories, which were basically they remember when they were that past personality. They remember their death, and they remember what would have been their NDE if they weren't reincarnated. So they will talk about, I was run over by a wagon and my soul left my body and I went and I met this divine being or whatever. So to me, that's really fascinating that children who remember past lives are describing basically what we would consider an NDE. But instead of being sent back to their old body, they're assigned to a new body. And that's when they're reincarnated. So, and I found some, pretty early examples of that cross-culturally.
Before we wrap up, we'll go to the chats to Orfeo Treshula asks, but there are some claims of baneful NDEs, aren't there? Not many, but it seems there's some, which I'm assuming would be a negative experience.
Yeah, there's definitely some distressing experiences. I think it's something like 3% or whatever. But
what are they? Is there an archetype for those? Is there like sort of a?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, they don't seem to have the same consistency as an NDE. They don't seem to have these identifiable stages. Sometimes they do. They have like the same stages as an NDE, but the person who has the experience them in negative ways. So like the darkness will be terrifying, and rushing through the darkness is terrifying, and the being of light is threatening. So it's the same thing, but it's maybe the psychological state of the person that's coloring it. But aside from that, yeah, for the most part, like the types of negativity they experience are either kind of amorphous, like they're just in fearful darkness for a long time, or they're not really that identifiably similar between people.
Great. Well, I mean, Graham kind of touched on it, but before we wrap up, Gregory, is there anything you think we missed or that you'd like to touch on from the book or from your research?
Well, no, not that I can think of, except that like, just kind of touching on the negativity of belief and all that. I think the research kind of shows that if you do want to believe that near-death experiences are actual evidence for an afterlife, I think there really is nothing to be afraid of. And just kind of trusting what people who have these experiences say and what their experience is, because obviously their experience of this stuff is much greater than ours if we haven't had the experience. So I think that's there's a compelling argument to believe, if not in the supernatural afterlife aspect of it, to at least believe in what the death process is going to be like, that it's not really going to be that terrifying or difficult.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Dr. Greg Shushan, this has been great. Where can people get the book when it comes out? Where can they follow your work? Do you have any websites? Do you have social media, all that stuff? We'll put it all in the show notes, but a lot of people don't ever go to the show notes. So we just encourage the guests to give those URLs right here.
Sure. Yeah. Website is just my full name, GregoryShushan.com. I'm on pretty much all the social medias with my actual name. So Facebook,
which is 1G, Gregory with 1G.
Yeah. So pretty much all those, I'm easily findable, and the book should be available pretty much everywhere on any book selling website, or directly from the publisher, which is Inner Traditions. Or you can become a patron and you get free books and stuff, bonus stuff
Awesome.
on my Patreon website.
And when's your next book coming out after this?
Oh man,
like a year or two, or
yeah, at least a couple of years. Yeah, I'm still doing the research. And then at some point, I'll also have a historical anthology of near-death experiences, where a lot of these accounts, like just verbatim, I'm going to put together in one volume. So yeah,
that's awesome. We'll keep up the good work.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Gregory. This has been fantastic. Come back anytime.
Great. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Take care.
And that was a chat with Dr. Gregory Shushan, near-death experiences and ancient civilizations. What'd you think? I knew that would end up being right up your alley.
Oh yeah. I know that was a great choice, because honestly, that's what I've been thinking while reading putting all this research together. I'm like, how is this not just well known? How is this not a thing? So I'm glad he's the one putting all this together.
Absolutely.
I can't believe it hasn't been like overdone already, but it's good that somebody's doing it.
So big thanks to Dr. Gregory for coming on the show. Big thanks to you guys for listening. Even bigger thanks, of course, if you're one of the few who choose to support us, keep us on the air. We are listener-supported value for value show. So if you are getting some value from our podcast, head over to grimerica.ca/support today. Sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation. And that'd be swell. That would be swell. I did see actually Corey Ash, who's one of our big supporters. Oh, big time supporters. We appreciate you, Corey, if you're still listening. Seen him in the chats earlier. So thank you. Thank you to everyone else who supports the show. Please do that. grimerica.ca/support. Of course, check out grimericaoutlaw.ca if you want to see all the kind of content that got us kicked out, demonetized on YouTube in the first place. Adultbrain.ca if you want to check out our 140 plus audiobooks, available also as a YouTube channel if you don't want to buy them. And contact at the cabin for the trips. We got a great one coming up with Randall Carlson, searching for Atlantis in the Azores. There's only 2 spots left for that. I mean, I've been warning you guys. Now we're there. We're going to sell out imminent. So check that out. And I'm missing one, right? Grimerica CBD. Grimerica CBD. We sell weed now, and not just weed. It's CBD. Not weed. It's CBD. So yeah, it's not weed.
Some of it is. I mean, there's some gummies.
I mean, it was inevitable we'd end up slanging drugs eventually. So you can check that out. It's not drugs, though. It's good for all your ailments. We got gummies. We got tinctures. There is some 5 milligram THC ones there if you're feeling a little squirrely. So that's grimericacbd.com. And I think that's it. There's mushrooms too, but you got to check that in the show notes. I can't say that out loud on YouTube. So I'll leave it at that. We love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Think if I sit here long enough, it's to this green round spot on Earth, approximately 2010 year. Hello, Dominique. Hello, Dominique. My heart drink would turn cold. My heart drink would turn cold. Dream sequence. Dream sequence. She'd eventually roll by on her bicycle, on her bicycle, on her bicycle. Basket and all. shoes. Think if I hired a million monkeys and let them mash away on some typewriters, they'd eventually write all those Shakespeare sonnets. Maybe then you'd love me. Maybe then you'd love me. Me and my monkey. Get funky. Don't get funky now. Get funky. Dream sequence. Dream sequence. You'd eventually roll by on your bicycle, on your bicycle, on your bicycle, basket and all. Green, brown, blue, green, brown, blue, green, brown, blue. Mother Nature's songbirds chirping. Woke up this morning, feeling around for my shoes. I love you up to the sky. 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 Dream sequence. As you run a county sheep, I come through with some comic relief. I roll by on a tricycle, on a tricycle, on a tricycle, basket and all. Milk and honey, milk and honey, milk and honey. To be or not to be, that is a question we've had. Woke up this morning and all my blues was dead and gone. Is it just me or is American? Is it talent? Is it talent?